Hey there, folks. So, last episode was a bit of a when things go wrong episode. I had screwed up, tried to overcomplicate things by creating a struct for the perception configuration for our NPCs, and ultimately that sort of backfired on me and it just didn't work. So, we fixed that, added a few variables, and got things working again. This episode, I have decided we are going to start on the. Sorry, I just moused over something on my start bar. We're going to start on equipment. Now, equipment itself is quite a complex setup. So, what I've done is I have created this lovely little flow diagram. I know I had a similar one for the last time we worked on inventory, but I thought I would redo it because it's a little more complex than I had previously defined it and set it up based on how I want to do this. So right now, we have, let me just grab this, grab some colors here, go green. We have our item, I'm on a vector layer. We have our item base. This is done. We have our consumable item and we have our junk item. So we don't need to worry about those three base classes. What we do need to look at, though, is how we want to set up our equipment. And I do like using derived and child classes, well, derived/child classes, wherever possible, simply because it allows you to reuse logic as frequently as possible. So I've tried to set this up in a way that it's the classes are derived as best as possible. So ultimately, when you look at an equipment system, you're looking at things the player can equip. Now that is our base class, which is, I'm going to change this to a different color, which is our equipable. And I do apologize if I have any spelling mistakes here. I knocked this up pretty quickly trying to get recording on this episode because I'm actually, I've ran out of pre-recorded episodes. I have to get this out for tomorrow. So we have our base class, which is our equipable. And that is going to be the parent class of all clothing, armor, things like that, and our weapons, because both of those are things that can be equipped. Now, as I just mentioned, we have our clothing, and then our weapons. Well, and actually there's one in here I could probably derive further. I was literally just thought of it. But so within our clothing, we don't really have the need for any additional distinction apart from possibly one. And I intentionally left this out because it's not really a child class. It's what I'd call like a sibling, not even a sibling, a brother class. And that is going to be, I'm just going to change this back to black. And you can't see me typing this, but our, there we go, backpack class. And I'd left this out because I wanted to also show how I go about this planning, because that's another thing that's very useful, is planning before you start writing things, because like writing the code, because you could plan everything out and it's perfect, or you can plan things out and you go, oh, actually this isn't going to work. Or you can not plan, do a bunch of code work that takes even longer than the planning would do, and then realize it's not going to work after the fact. So I do try to plan things as much as possible. You've probably heard me mention it in a few episodes that I need to go plan and think about some things. But there is one class here, and this is where I wish Unreal Engine allowed dual inheritance. And what that is you could have normal C++, you can have two inheritance. You can inherit from equipable and, well, something else. But you can't do that with Unreal Engine. So the backpack, the reason why I want to have that separate, actually, I'm going to change that. It's not really a backpack. it is a, excuse me, container. The reason why I want to make that distinction is you have things like belt bags, you have, let's say, I'm just thinking hypotheticals here. You have your backpack, you have your tactical vests that have storage, you have cargo pants that could potentially have storage. But a t-shirt doesn't. Yes, you can get t-shirts with pockets, so on and so forth. So for that, we would want to have a separate subclass of the, count on colors, subclass of clothing that is dedicated for containers, because it's going to have some of its own unique logic, like its own inventory storage space, or however I decide to do that. I haven't actually figured out how I want to do that yet compared to a generic inventory system, because you're going to have your backpack, but, well, the ability for a backpack, that's a given. But what I'm not 100% sure I want to handle multiple different storage receptacles. Do I want to have separate inventories like, say, Project Zomboid, where you have different individual inventories for each item? Or do you want to, or do I want to have like just a generic inventory that I add to? Like increasing the carry capacity, things like that. But either way, so we've got that. Our weapons, we have two subclasses of that. You have your melee weapon and you have your ranged weapon. And this is where that one I was like, I just thought of that came in, and I'm not sure if I want to have it as a subclass of ranged or its own unique subclass of weapon, and that's throwables. So think grenades, Molotov cocktails, things like that. So again, we'll add that in. I'll just hit X to switch over there, and I'm going to put this one here because I'm not actually sure where I want this to fall yet. And yes, I'm typing off screen, but that's because with Krita, it opens up a separate window for that. And then what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to change this to a gray line. No, gray doesn't cover it properly. What color do I want to use? Blue. No, yeah, blue. And yes, I understand this isn't really writing too much code right now, but it's something that I wanted to show, because, and my great question mark there looks like a 2. But it's something I wanted to show because it is part of the planning process, and that works for everything, not just game design. It's code in general. I would highly recommend you plan. But anyways, now that we've got that, so going through, just to expand on this, we've got a distinction between our weapons of melee, ranged, and then I'm not sure, again, do I want to do a throwable as a subclass of ranged, or do I want to do it as its own subclass of weapon? Now, for ranged, we're talking your firearms, bows, crossbows, guns, things like that. Oh, excuse me. They obviously need ammunition. What are they actually using for their projectile? Now, you could just create... that's not what I wanted to do. Middle mouse. You could just create like its own distinct class from item base, but I want to be able to like break down the ammunition. I want to be able to do things like, oh, I've got a 9mm round. I want to pull it apart. I want to be able to get casing. I want to get gunpowder. I want to get primer. I want to get the bullet tip. Or shotgun shells. I want to get the casing, the primer, gunpowder, the wad, and the shot. Things like that. Because again, I'm wanting to try and create as realistic as possible a survival game. And in there, I want the ability to like, oh, I found shotgun shells. I don't want to use shotgun shells, but I could use the gunpowder and I figure out how to reload ammo, or I want to use the shot and I want to melt it down to make something else. I don't know what I would use. You would use melted lead for, but anyways, because of that, I made the decision to extend, well, have a derived class of the junk item for the ammunition, which is obviously something that the ranged weapons require. Now, with that, what I've got here off to the side, and I never filled anything out, this is just, oh, I hate how it's middle mouse. A place where I could put down, well, what does each of these need for their information. So, however, I decided against doing that. Oh, where that layer? There we go. Simply because Critter was being a pain in the butt, because instead of doing next line, it's skipping a line. But so let's go slot. I'm just going to add a couple of things in here to give you an idea. Okay, I'll just put those in, and you can see also why I chose not to do this, because of how messy this looks. Because it creates individual parts for each one. I got a huge vector layer there. Oh, anyway, so with that, this gives you a rough idea. So we have an equipable item. Well, what slot does it fit? Every equipable item is going to have a slot or slots that it can occupy on your equipment grid. Okay, well, clothing, what's clothing offer? It's going to offer protection. And then a container item of clothing is also going to offer storage space. Your weapon, well, we have to think, okay, well, what is a melee, a ranged, and a throwable gonna all have in common? Well, there's handiness, and what that means, or what I'm referencing by that, is it a one-handed weapon? Is it a two-handed weapon? Can it be a one-handed weapon and a two-handed weapon? So let's say, for example, I'm trying to think what you could do that, a pool cue. That's you could use that as a one-handed weapon. It's going to be really awkward to wield. Or you could use it as a two-handed weapon, and it's going to be a little easier to use. Obviously, all weapons are going to have a base damage amount. Then for melee, well, what sort of things is melee going to have? Well, it's going to have, obviously, a hand... going back to the handiness, it's going to have a handiness modifier if it's multi-use. So a one-handed, like swinging a pool cue with one hand, you're going to hit hard. Swinging it with both hands, you're going to hit harder. And that's what that's going to be. So you're going to have things like damage modifiers there. Where a ranged weapon, you're not going to have a damage modifier if you're using a rifle one-handed or two-handed. You're going to have an accuracy modifier. Using, say, a Barrett 50 cal with one hand, you're probably not going to be able to even aim properly, let alone like hit the target. So there's certain things there as well. Ammo, obviously, it's going to have a damage modifier because you're going to have your base damage of the weapon that's going to get modified by the ammunition type that's loaded. So thinking there, all the different types of ammunition. There's FMJ, copper, steel, incendiary. Like there's all those different types. And they're going to have a damage and potential side effect. Incendiary, you shoot something with that, it's potentially going to catch on fire, sort of thing. And then throwables, obviously, they have their own status effect. So, I know we're already 14 minutes into the video and we haven't really even touched the code yet, but this was an important thing to break down. I wanted to break this down so that it was understood the direction I was going with things. So with this, though, the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on the equipable item. So for that, we're going to hop back over to the engine quickly. I'm going to pull over our content browser. Go down to our C++ classes, fall, public, items, and then here you go. You can see we have consumable, item, and junk item. Well, taking a look, we're basing this off the item base. So we're going to work from that one. Create C++ class derived from item base. Equipable. And before I actually type that out, equipable. Is it 1P? I believe it's 1P. Sorry, I'm just checking spelling off on the side of the screen. Yeah, okay, it's 2Ps. So, equipable item base. And you can see it's already in our items folder. We're going to create class. And what I'm going to do for this, I'm actually going to pre-create a lot of these just so that we can move things along at a quicker pace in future episodes. So this is going to be a bit of a slower episode. There's not going to be a huge amount of actual code progress, but it's going to be setting up the foundations for everything else. So once we've got this one in, we're going to want to create, obviously, our derived class for clothing and weapon. And we're going to want to, obviously, again, for our slot, we're going to want to determine, do we want to use a integer as a reference? Do we want to use a enum? Things like that. Now, personally, I'm already made the decision I am going to use an enum. And it's going to be an array. An array or a map? Can't be a map because, well, it could be a map, but that's a little overkill. Actually, I wanted to use an enum, but I'm trying to think because you could have, say, for example, I'm trying to think something multi-slot. Brain's not working. Actually, I'm trying to think if there's anything that would be multi-slot. No, thinking about it, there isn't. Because, yeah, your slot would be handheld, or hands, plural. And then handiness, it down from the weapon category, would be used to determine. So, yeah, actually, no, there is no multi-slot there. So, okay, are you done yet? It's still compiling. I thought I turned off live compile. Well, anyways, so what I'm going to do, just because like we are already at the 18-minute mark, I'm going to go through, let me just grab a different color here. Purple. Well, fuchsia. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and create these derived classes. I'm not going to add any logic. I'm just going to go through the process within the editor to create those base classes. And then I will be back, like I said, just in the interest of time to save you guys watching me do the same thing over and over again when it's literally just changing the name of a class. So I will be back in a moment. Alright, so I've gone through, I've created the clothing, the equipable, and the weapon item base classes. Now the other thing I just talking about that I want to create is that enum for the slot. So what we're going to do here, we'll just go back to our public folder, right click new C++ class, leave that as the none empty, do our folder selection and select the data type folder, and this is going to be equipment slot. And we're just going to create that class. And this is the last thing we need to create to get things started with these, well, I say 3 base classes. Really, it's the 3 classes we're using for the core equipment system. So now that's done, we're going to hop back to... Actually, I'm going to close out of the editor this time instead of just dropping out. I'm going to wait for the editor to... Visual Studio to stop there. Come on, you're all but done. TikTok. But yeah, so anyways, while this does its thing, I'm going to reload all now. So we're going to obviously have our slots, our various items, and everything that we're going to work on there. So the equipment slot, good, it did load. So I'm going to close out of all of this stuff. And we're going to start, first of all, just with the equipment slot. Pretty easy, you just get rid of that. And actually, I think there's stuff created in the source file as well, isn't there? Yep, get rid of those. Okay, so as before, UE blueprint type, because we want this to be exposed to the editor, because as I've mentioned, though I'm doing everything in C++ where possible, well, where I'm comfortable in C++, there's certain things like animations and UI that I'm not comfortable in C++ yet, but you need to keep in mind, are you always going to be the only developer working on the project? Is somebody else going to be coming in to help you out who's more of a blueprint person? So exposing things to blueprints where possible, that makes sense. It's a really fine line, but exposing things to blueprint is always a good idea if it's not going to potentially risk things down the line. So anyway, so it's an enum equipment slot. It's derived from a uint8 because that's how it works with Unreal Engine. So equipment slot underscore, we're going to say head. I'm just going to put a few in here quickly. Actually, for ease, I'm going to copy that. Head, torso, hands, legs, feet, weapon, backpack. Now, this is obviously not going to be an exhaustive list. There's going to be more. I haven't fully decided how in-depth I want my equipment system to be. Honestly, I'm thinking I want left shoe, left hand, right hand, belt, socks. Yeah, I'm thinking a equipment grid equipable setup that is pretty exhaustive, because I want to have like t-shirt, sweater, hoodie, heavy winter coat. I want, like, if you're in the Arctic, you're going to have multiple layers, things like that. So, but for now, this is the basis we're going to do. Is that going to fix that issue? Does not have a zero entry. It's a problem with the enum. I'm going to have to look into what that error is. I'm going to see if this resolves it. But probably not, because I'm just taking a guess. And then the other thing we want... Have we done that in our other enums? Yes. Include equipable slot generated .h. Okay, so that's our initial setup there. Pretty basic. Like I said, this isn't going to be exhaustive. I need to actually sort of iron it out, but this is a nice point to work from. So the next thing, sorry, I'm losing myself in this. Sorry, it's because items. So the next thing, we want to work on our equipable item base. Well, in here, we're going to want to include data type equipment slot. So in here, we're going to go private, protected, and public. U property, edit defaults only, blueprint read only, allow, meta equals allow private access equals true. And then we want equipment slot type. Now, there's a few other things that we want to take into consideration here. What is something that, get rid of that pink for a second, all of these items are going to have in common? Well, we have the slot. Well, the other thing is they're all going to go on a character. Well, to go on a character, 9 times out of 10, they're going to have a skeletal mesh. So, why are you complaining? You cannot use one as a type. Oh, yeah. Enum as byte. It's because this is a data class. So, yeah, it's there. Don't complain. Thank you. So the next one we want is U property edit. Looks like it's spelled property right. Edit defaults only. Blueprint read write. Read only. Meta equals allow. I don't know. I just didn't copy this. Okay, and then it's going to be a class because we don't want to include the header here because it just adds a load of bloat. And this particular class, because it is nothing but a data class, does not need to know about all of the functionality of the skeletal mesh. So it's class U skeletal mesh component pointer character mesh. All right. So, well, what do you complain about there? What do I miss? Okay, complains about. I'm just going to do this because it apparently doesn't like what I put in the first one. Oh, because I can't spell private right. Derp. All right, so we have our slot type. We have our character mesh. Well, what other things are we going to want on? Available to every single equipable item? Well, off the top of my head, that's the only thing. So what we want to do is add in some functions quickly. Blueprint callable, blueprint pure, because these are going to be const returns. I'm going to enum as byte, get slot type const, and actually I'm going to add that in as a forward declaration at the top, because then we don't need to do it down here because we're going to use it twice. Get character mesh const. Now the whole reason for using consts is to ensure that once the information leaves this data class, it can't be changed. It makes it immutable. So create these two definitions quickly. And I'm actually getting close to, we're going to want to end this episode off. So we might have 2 episodes of some setup, but we don't need that. So we want slot type, return slot type, and return character mesh. And we're just going to do a build quick to make sure I haven't caused any weird problems. So while the build runs, because this may take a little bit, I will use this as a chance to sort of go over some things. So like I said, I don't want it from here. I want it from this one. Our equipment slots, actually built really quick. Our equipment slots, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, and you can set this up however you want. Like, you've got some games that you have multiple equipable slots. Like, as I mentioned, Project Zomboid, you have like shoes, socks, pants, belt, depending if it's, well, vanilla, and then you have undershirt, outer shirt, hoodie, coat, head, gloves. Like, there's just off the top, I think there's 6 or 7 equipment slots for clothing on a player character in Zomboid. 7 because there's backpack. And then you have the ability to hold things in your hands, which is also equipment slots. But then you have other games like, let's say, Project Zomboid. Not Project Zomboid, that's one I just talked about. 7 Days to Die. I like playing zombie games, if you haven't gathered. Previously, they had a bunch, but now with 1.0, there's 4. There's head, chest, hands, and feet. Sorry. Head, hands, feet, and everything else. I'll rephrase that. It's not really chest. Because that's your legs, your chest, your arms, all in one item. So it's going to be down to how extensive you want the number of equipment items available to your characters. So anyways, with that, folks, we're just crossing the 30-minute mark here. So I'm going to end this episode off now. Next episode, we're going to be continuing on with getting things set up here, and also we're going to be working on our character base class to actually set up some stuff for the skeletal mesh that we added in right here. So, as always though, folks, thanks for watching. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks again, and I will see you in the next episode.